The engine on the lift was still ticking as it cooled, and that small sound was the only thing in the shop louder than the silence between them. Cassandra Prescott stood at the door with her coat already on. She had the posture of a woman who ended meetings by standing, who had never in her life needed to explain why she was leaving a room. The most powerful woman in the city, and she could not hold the eyes of a mechanic in a grease-stained shirt. "Stop being so kind to me," she said. Jesse Hartley set the wrench down on the fender. He did it slowly, the way he did everything with his hands, and he did not chase her, and he did not apologize. "What are you afraid of?" he asked. He said it quietly enough that she stopped mid-step, one hand already on the frame of the door. For a moment, there was nothing between them but the tick of the cooling engine she had paid a small fortune to save, and the low hum of the lights, and 3 years of things she had never once said out loud. She turned back. Her voice broke on the very first word. "That you'll want something too," she said. "Everyone does." Before you go any further, hold on to that question, because the man asking it did not know he was talking to the wealthiest woman in the county. And before the end of this, you will understand why that mattered more than anything either of them owned. 10 weeks earlier, none of this had happened yet. There was only a car and a promise, and a shop that closed at 6 o'clock so a father could get home to his daughter. Hartley's Restoration sat at the end of a street where the rent was still fair, 2 bays and a gravel lot, and a hand-painted sign that had faded honestly in the sun. In the mornings, the light came in low through the roll-up doors and lay across the concrete in long gold bars, and Jesse Hartley worked inside it the way other men prayed. He was 37 years old. He had a jaw that women noticed and a way of not noticing that they had. Dark hair going a little rough at the temples, forearms marked with the small pale scars a working life leaves. He looked like what he was, which was a capable man who had held hard things together and not let them make him hard. At a workbench turned into a desk, an 8-year-old girl did her homework with her tongue between her teeth. Clara Hartley had her mother's stubborn cowlick and her father's patience, and she had turned a stripped bolt into a keychain that Jesse carried in his pocket the way some men carry a saint's medal. Customers came to Hartley's from 3 states away. They came because Jesse Hartley could bring a dead machine back to life, could read a seized engine like a letter from an old friend, could match a paint that had not been mixed since before he was born. He could have named any price he wanted. Collectors would have paid it and thanked him. He named a fair one. He named the same number for the man with the private hangar and the widow 2 blocks over with her late husband's truck. And then he went home at 6 o'clock because a girl was waiting who had already lost enough clocks that stopped. That week, a man had driven in from 2 states over, a lawyer with soft hands, and a coupe worth more than the building it was parked in. And he had come expecting to be flattered and upcharged and made to feel important the way money is used to being treated. Jesse had shaken his hand, listened to the problem, quoted him the same fair number he would have quoted anyone, and told him it would be 4 weeks because there were 2 jobs ahead of him, and he did not jump the line for anybody. The lawyer had not known what to do with that. He had come with his wallet open and his guard up, and neither one was any use here. "People told me you were the best in 3 states, the man had said, half a complaint. "I don't know about that," Jesse had answered, already turning back to the car on the lift. "And I know I do it right, and I do it once. 4 weeks. I'll call you when it's yours." The lawyer had left oddly quiet, the way people often left Hartley's, carrying the strange feeling of having been treated exactly the same as everybody else, and finding it, against all expectation, a kind of luxury. "Did you fix the sad car yet?" Clara asked him one evening, not looking up from her drawing. "Which sad car is that?" "The one that's coming. You always know before they call." She said it the way children say the true things, without weight. "Something sad's coming. I can tell." He laughed and told her to finish her math. But he thought about it later, at the kitchen counter, under the recipe card still taped to the cabinet in Diana's round, hopeful handwriting. And he did not entirely disagree with his daughter. Grief had taught him to feel weather coming. Diana had died 2 springs before, after an illness that took only 4 months and felt like 4 minutes and 4 centuries at once. She had been the loud one, the warm one, the one who filled a room. Jesse had learned, in the season after, how to be 2 parents in 1 tired body. He learned to braid hair badly and pack lunches and sit in the pediatrician's waiting room alone. He learned that a shop kept small was a shop he could leave at 6. It had not made him bitter. That was the thing people expected and the thing that never came. It had made him careful with people, the way he was careful with old metal that could not be replaced, because he understood now, in his hands and not just his head, that some things do not come again if you break them. He kept the small proofs of her everywhere and made no ceremony of them. The recipe card in her handwriting, a chipped mug she had liked, the habit of singing badly in the shop, which he had picked up from her and could not put down. On the hard nights after Clara was asleep, he would sit at the kitchen counter with a cold coffee and the shop's ledger and simply miss his wife, quietly, the way you favor an old injury when the weather turns. And then in the morning he would get up and braid the hair and pack the lunch and open the doors at 8, because a child does not stop needing breakfast just because the world has ended. Ike Halloran, the old man who had taught Jesse the trade 40 years back and then handed him the shop, called it the difference between a wound and a scar. "A wound you protect," Ike liked to say, tapping his own chest with a knuckle. "A scar you just carry. You carry good, kid. Your girl's watching how you carry it." Jesse had never forgotten that. He tried to carry it in a way Clara could learn from. 40 miles away, in a house with a garage bigger than Jesse's whole shop, a different kind of grief had set like concrete. 3 years before, Charles Winslow had died on an ordinary Tuesday, in the ordinary way that is the cruelest, with his sleeves rolled up and his hands still warm. He had been happy that week. He had been happy because of a car, a 1967 coupe he had bought half-wrecked and half-finished, a project he tinkered at on weekends the way other executives played golf. He had been building the engine himself, by hand, badly and joyfully, when his heart simply stopped. His widow had learned a different lesson than Jesse had. Cassandra Prescott had learned that grief made a woman a target. She ran a company that a great many people wanted a piece of, and in the year after Charles died, she discovered that condolence and appetite wore the same face. The board sent flowers and then agendas. Men she had known for years appeared at her elbow with soft voices and hard intentions. Every kindness arrived with a price tag she was expected to be too polite to read. "Everyone who was kind to me that year wanted the company," she told her assistant once, and then never said it again. I stopped being able to tell the difference between comfort and a takeover. Her brother-in-law had appointed himself her wall. Everett Winslow was Charles's older brother, a broad, careful man who loved his family the way a man loves a fortress, which is to say, by keeping everyone inside it and everyone else out. "Let me handle the vultures, Cassandra," he told her, again and again across 3 years. "That is what family is for." He was not wrong about the vultures. He was only wrong about what a wall does to the person it protects. Behind it, Cass had grown very safe and very alone, and the car that Charles had loved had gone under a cover in climate storage, untouched, gathering the dust of 1,000 days. She could not make herself walk into that room. The car was the worst of it, because the car was the happiest of it. Charles had bought the coupe, half-wrecked, the year before he died, and he had loved it with the pure, uncomplicated joy of a serious man who has finally found something to be unserious about. He was terrible at it. He rounded bolt heads and read the manual upside down, and once spent an entire Sunday installing a part backward and laughing about it. He would come inside at dusk with grease to his elbows and a boy's grin and tell her he had almost figured out the timing. He was close. Next weekend, for sure. There was no next weekend. He died with the engine 2/3 built and the timing still not right. And for 3 years, the coupe had sat under its cover, being the exact shape of everything unfinished. Cass had paid the storage bill every month without once opening the door. It was easier to keep paying than to go in and see his handwriting on a legal pad still taped to the wall. The little joyful arrows and the crossed-out numbers. A man's happiness frozen mid-sentence. Then, in the spring of the present year, on no particular morning, she decided it was time to finish it. She did not tell Everett. She told a collector she trusted, an old friend of Charles's, that she wanted the coupe finished, wanted it done right, wanted the best hands in the region, and did not care what the best hands cost. The collector gave her one name. "There is exactly one man you want," he said. "He is not fancy, and he is not cheap in the ways that matter. He will treat that car like it is the last one on earth. Go see Hartley." So she went, in plain clothes, with her hair down, and her driver waiting at the curb, and she gave the man in the shop only her first name. "Cass," she said, and put out her hand. Jesse shook it and then walked around the car on the flatbed the way a good doctor walks around a patient he respects, slowly, saying nothing, letting it tell him things. He crouched at the wheel well. He ran one finger along a seam. He opened the hood and went very still. "I was told you are the only one who should touch it," Cass said, and heard, to her own irritation, the tightness in her voice. "Money is not the issue. Doing it right is the issue." "Then we already agree on the only thing that matters," Jesse said. He did not look up from the engine bay. "I will not rush it, and I will not pad it. You will get one honest number and the car back the way it deserves to be." She had come prepared to fight about the price, the way she fought about everything, because fighting was how she knew she had not been taken. There was nothing to fight. It unbalanced her more than any negotiation ever had. She looked around while he worked, the way you look around a room you did not expect to be comfortable in. The drawings taped by the register, all of them signed in a child's careful capitals. The old radio. A calendar with school holidays circled in red marker. A little girl at the workbench who looked up, decided Cass was acceptable, and went back to her drawing without a shred of the deference Cass spent her whole life swimming through. Nobody here had recognized her. Nobody here was going to. The relief of that was so sharp, It was almost painful. "How long?" she made herself ask, reaching for something businesslike to hold on to. "A while," Jesse said. "This is not a car you hurry. I will keep you honest on where it stands. You can come see it whenever you want. It is your car. It is your car." Such a simple thing to say. She drove home, turning it over like a stone in her pocket, unable to explain to herself why 4 ordinary words from a mechanic had loosened something in her chest that 3 years of careful management had kept locked down tight. What Jesse saw under the hood, he did not say out loud, not that first day. He saw that the engine had been half-built by hand, not by a shop, not by a machine, by a person, an amateur, someone who loved it, with the small imperfect choices and the stubborn workarounds of a man teaching himself as he went. Another restorer would have pulled the whole thing and dropped in something modern and fast and correct. Jesse looked at that engine and saw a man's unfinished handwriting in the metal, and he decided privately that he was not going to erase it. He was going to complete the sentence. Cass began to come back. She told herself it was to check on the work. It was a lie so thin that even her assistant, Renata Cho, stopped pretending to believe it. Cass came on Tuesdays, and then on Tuesdays and Fridays, and then whenever the week grew too loud, because the shop at the end of the fair rent street was the only place in her life where she was nobody special. There, she was not the chief executive. She was a woman in jeans, holding a mismatched mug of bad coffee, watching a man's careful hands, listening to an 8-year-old explain the plot of a cartoon in exhaustive detail. Clara's drawings were taped to the wall by the register. The radio played old songs. Nobody wanted anything from her. She laughed one afternoon, really laughed at something Clara said, and then caught herself appalled because she could not remember the last time. "Do you always talk to your customers like they are people?" she asked Jesse. "I only have the one setting," he said. "That must be inefficient." "It is." He wiped his hands on a rag. "Costs me a fortune. I recommend it." She smiled before she could stop herself, and she went home and lay awake because a warm shop and a kind man frightened her more than any hostile board ever had. A boardroom, she understood. A boardroom had rules. This had no rules and no price, and no catch that she could find. And a thing with no catch, in Cassandra Prescott's experience, was simply a catch she had not located yet. One Friday she stayed past dark. Clara had a loose tooth and would not stop reporting on it, and Jesse fixed the girl a snack and answered every single tooth question with complete seriousness, and Cass sat on an upturned crate in the corner of a garage in her expensive coat and watched a kind of ordinary happiness she had assumed was gone from the world entirely. When Clara finally fell asleep against her father's shoulder, Jesse carried her to the office cot without breaking his sentence and came back, and the two adults sat in the low light, not saying much of anything. "You're looking at me like I am a problem to solve," Jesse said, not unkindly. "You are a problem to solve," Cass said. "I am very good at people who want things. I have never once in my life met a person who did not want a single thing, and it is making me suspicious of you in a way I cannot defend." "Maybe I just like the company," he said, and shrugged. And it was so simple and so true that she had to look away. Renata Cho, who saw everything, said nothing on the drive home, but she smiled the whole way. Everett located the shop before he located the feeling. He kept an eye on her calendar the way he kept an eye on everything, and the same address appearing again and again set off every alarm a fortress has. He drove out one afternoon when he knew Cass would not be there, and he stood in the gravel lot and looked at the faded sign and the 2 bays and the little girl's drawings in the window. And he decided, on the evidence of his own suspicion, exactly what he was looking at. He came in. He did not give his name. He looked at the car, and he looked at Jesse, and he took an envelope out of his coat and laid it on the workbench squarely, the way a man lays down a winning hand. Men who are kind to women like my sister-in-law are usually kind for a reason, Everett said. In my experience, there is always a reason. So, name yours or take this, finish the car quickly, and be gone from her life when you hand her the keys. Jesse looked at the envelope. It was thick. He did not open it, but he had spent enough years around wealthy men to read the shape of what was inside, and it was more money than the shop cleared in a year. $75,000, maybe more, to disappear. He looked at the envelope for a long moment. Then he looked at the keychain in his own palm, the stripped bolt his daughter had made into a small, ugly, precious thing. And he understood that the price of his character was sitting right there on the bench, in the afternoon light, waiting. He set the keychain back in his pocket. He picked the envelope up and he held it out, and he went back to work. I already told her what it costs, Jesse said. That was the number. This is not part of it. Keep it. Everett did not take it back. Not right away. He stood there with the thing still in the air between them, and something crossed his careful face that he did not have a name for. And then he took it, and he left without another word. Jesse did not tell Cass. He saw no reason to. A man does not tell a woman that her family thinks she needs guarding from him. He simply finished the day and locked up and went home to make dinner. But Renata Cho had been in the lot that afternoon, waiting in the car, and Renata had seen the envelope go in and come back out. And Renata was fond of her boss in a way that made her unable to keep it to herself for long. It was 2 weeks after that, when Cass came in near closing, wound tight, having heard from Renata what her brother-in-law had done and what the mechanic had done in return, and not knowing what to do with the size of it. The shop was quiet. The engine was on the lift. Jessie was finishing for the night. She could not say the true thing, so she said the defended thing. "Stop being so kind to me," she told him. And he set the wrench down, slowly, and did not chase her, and asked her what she was afraid of, and the whole story caught up to the moment it had started in, and this time it did not stop there. "That you'll want something too," she said. "Everyone does. My board, my friends, the men who send flowers. Everett, even Everett, who loves me, wants to keep me small so he can keep me safe. Every kind thing anyone has done for me in 3 years has been a door closing quietly behind me. And then there is you, and you gave back $75,000 and did not even tell me. And I cannot find the trick, and it is making me insane, because there is always a trick." Jesse listened to all of it. He did not interrupt. When she was done, he wiped his hands and he walked to the lift, and he did the thing instead of saying the thing, which was always his way. "Come here," he said. "I want to show you something before you decide what I am." She came. She did not know why. She had stopped being a person who did things without knowing why, and she came anyway. He had the engine open. He had a work light angled down into it, and he pointed with one blunt, clean enough finger at a place where the metal changed. "You see that? where the machining gets rough, then smooth again? He traced the line. The rough part, your husband did that. By hand. He was teaching himself. He did it wrong 3 times and figured it out on the 4th. You can see him learning right there in the metal. Most shops would have thrown this whole engine out and put in something correct. I did not throw it out. Cass could not speak. I finished it the way he was going to finish it, Jesse said. I read what he started and I kept going in his handwriting. This part, this whole heart of the thing, is still his. I just would not let it stay unfinished. For 3 years, she had braced for the catch. She had walked through the world with her whole body clenched around the certainty that every gift was a bill in disguise. She stood in a grease-smelling shop at closing time and looked at her dead husband's own hands made whole by a stranger who had turned down a fortune and never mentioned it, and there was no catch. There was only kindness, with nothing on the other end of it. It undid her more completely than any cruelty ever had. She reached into the engine bay and touched the place where the rough work met the smooth, where her husband's hands ended and a stranger's began, and the two were so carefully joined that you had to know to look. She had spent 3 years unable to open a storage door. Here was the thing behind that door, brought out into the light and made whole. The happiest part of Charles handed back to her by a man who had asked for nothing. "Why?" she said finally, and it came out very small, nothing like her boardroom voice. Anyone else would have thrown it out and sold me a better engine, and I would never have known the difference. Why keep his? Jesse thought about it the way he thought about everything, without hurry. Because it was his, he said. You do not throw away the part somebody loved just because you could do it faster. That is the whole job. That is the only part of the job that matters. He wiped his hands, not looking at her, giving her the privacy to feel it. I did not know whose car it was when you brought it. I did not need to. I just knew somebody had been happy building it and then stopped, and that seemed like a thing worth finishing right. She had to sit down. She sat on the crate in the corner in her expensive coat, and she cried quietly for the first time in 3 years. And Jesse did the only kind thing there was to do, which was to keep working and let her, and not make it a moment, and hand her a clean shop rag without a single word. Everett, in the same days, was doing what Everett did, which was building a case. He had a man look into Jesse Hartley quietly, expecting to be handed the reason he already knew was there. The man came back with the wrong kind of file. He came back with a record of a rare mark that Jesse had restored years before, a car that now sat under museum lights with a small brass plaque. He came back with the story of a famous collector, a household name, who had offered Jesse a commission large enough to change his life and had been turned down because taking it would have meant closing his doors to the ordinary people who kept the lights on and the hours sane. He came back with 15 years of invoices, and every one of them was fair. Everett sat with that file for a long time in his big, careful house. He had gone looking for a con man and found a craftsman who could not be bought, and the discovery did not make him angry. It made him ashamed, which is a harder and better thing. I offered to buy a man who is not for sale, he said, to no one, in an empty room. God help me. I have been guarding the wrong door for 3 years. He went to Cass first. He did not do it by phone. He drove to her and sat across from her and told her plainly everything he had tried to do and everything he had found. I have spent 3 years standing between you and everyone who wanted something, Everett said. I was good at it. I kept out the takers. I was proud of it. He stopped, and his careful voice was not careful anymore. I never once thought to guard you from being alone. I mistook a wall for love. He is a better man than the men I was protecting you from, and I tried to pay him to leave, and he handed it back to me like it was nothing. I was wrong, Cassandra, about all of it. Then Everett went to the shop, and this time he did not bring a check. He brought his hand. Jesse looked at it and looked at the man, and he understood that pride costs something to put down and that Everett had just paid it in full. He took the hand. He did not make him grovel. Cruelty was never in Jesse Hartley, not even the small permitted kind that a man is owed. You were looking out for her, Jesse said. I was too. We were on the same side the whole time. You just did not know it yet. Everett stood in the shop a moment longer, a big, careful man with nowhere to put his hands. He looked at the coupe, at his brother's own rough handwork joined so gently to a stranger's skill, and something in his face came apart and then settled into a better shape. Charles would have liked you, he said, gruff, as if the words cost him. He liked people who did things with their hands. I never understood it. I signed papers. He built things. You would have gotten along. He cleared his throat. The part he did. On the engine. You could have hidden it, made it all smooth and perfect, and taken the credit for the whole build. You left it where anyone who knows can see it was his. It was his, Jesse said simply. I just finished the sentence. Everett nodded slowly, like a man revising a long-held opinion in real time. Then he did a thing he had not planned. He asked if the girl at the workbench was Jesse's daughter, and when Jesse said yes, Everett walked over and admired her drawing with genuine attention and asked her 3 real questions about it and listened to all 3 answers. Clara decided he was acceptable. She had a low tolerance for adults who pretended, and Everett, in that moment, was not pretending anything. Everett drove away that afternoon with nothing bought, and for the first time in 3 years, nothing lost. The engine turned over for the first time on a Thursday night, after Clara was asleep at the neighbor's, and the shop was empty except for Jesse and the work. He primed it. He checked it twice because he always checked it twice. Then he turned the key, and Charles Winslow's own handwork, completed in his own handwriting by a man who had never met him, caught and coughed and settled into a low, steady idle that filled the whole shop like a held breath finally let go. Jesse stood there with his hand flat on the fender and let himself feel it, which he did not often do. He had built the sad car whole. He had not noticed until it ran how long his own had been idling. 2 years of 6 o'clock closings and packed lunches and braided hair and holding steady, and somewhere in there he had quietly stopped expecting anything to be for him. The engine ran warm and alive under his palm, and something in his own chest turned over with it. Clara named it, of course. Clara named everything true before the adults could get to it. Is Cass going to keep coming over after the car is done? She asked at breakfast, around a mouthful of cereal. I don't know, sweetheart. You should ask her. Clara considered him with her mother's frank eyes. You're brave about everything except that. Jesse looked at his daughter, out-argued at 7 in the morning by an 8-year-old, and did not have a single word to say back, because she was right, and they both knew she was right, and she went back to her cereal like a person who had settled the matter. He turned it off and stood a while in the quiet after, the metal ticking as it cooled, that same small sound from the very beginning of everything, only now it did not feel like an ending being held off. It felt like a start. He locked up and he drove home, and he stood in Clara's doorway for a minute, the way parents do, watching her sleep. And he thought, for the first time in 2 years, that he might have room in his life for something he had stopped letting himself want. The finished car took its first real drive on an early summer morning, up the coast road, with the windows down. Cass drove. It was right that she drove. Jesse sat in the passenger seat with his arm along the door, and Clara sat in the back with the wind in her hair. And the car her husband had loved ran clean and strong beneath all three of them. The past carried along, honored, no longer a weight in a locked room. "I keep waiting for the bill I can't afford," Cass said, over the wind, watching the road. "There isn't one," Jesse said. "There was never going to be one. That is the whole thing. That is all it ever was." She did not answer right away. She drove, and the coast slid by, and somewhere in the miles, her hands loosened on the wheel, one finger at a time, until she was only driving, not gripping, and her face in the mirror was a face Jesse had not seen on her before. It was the face of a woman who had finally set something down. They stopped at a diner halfway up the coast, the kind with vinyl booths and a chalkboard, and a waitress who called everyone honey, and Cass ate a grilled cheese with her elbows on the table and did not check her phone once. Clara declared the milkshakes the best in the world. Jesse paid the small bill and left a large tip, and Cass watched him do it. This man who gave more than was asked at every single opportunity, and understood that it was not a strategy and had never been a strategy. It was simply the shape of him. Some people were built to take and had to be watched. This one was built to give and had spent his whole quiet life doing it where no one important was looking. "I spent 3 years learning to read the angle in everyone," she said, back on the road, the wind in her hair. "And you never had one. I could have saved myself the trouble." "You couldn't have known that from across a boardroom," Jesse said. "You had to see it up close. That's all. Some things you can only find out slow." After the car was done, Cass kept coming to the shop. She came without the excuse now, on ordinary evenings, with no reason at all, except that she wanted to be there. Clara set 3 plates without being asked, which is the loudest thing a child can say. Everett sent the Automobile Museum a photograph of the finished engine and asked quietly that when they displayed the coupe someday, they put Charles Winslow's name on the plaque as the builder, because that part had always been his. The keychain Clara had made, the stripped bolt turned into a small, ugly, precious thing, ended up hanging from the finished car's mirror. No one decided to put it there. It simply appeared one day and stayed, the way the best things do. On an evening weeks later, at dusk, Cass and Jesse closed up the shop together, unhurried, the way people do a thing they have done many times and intend to do many more. The light was going golden long across the concrete. Clara was drawing something at the workbench. The finished car sat cooling in the bay, the little keychain turning slowly on its string. Neither of them had been looking for this. He had only been finishing another man's work, and she had only been trying to keep the one thing that could not be taken from her. Kindness, it turned out, was not an angle, and it was not a door closing quietly behind her, and it was not a bill she would spend her life unable to pay. It was only what was left when a good man had nothing to sell and gave anyway. The garage light went off. Two people and a girl walked out across the gravel to a car that ran, and the ordinary evening closed around them, warm and asking nothing, and holding them all the same.